This lesson we will build a hand and fingers setup, and this will be a little bit more complex than the actual arm setup. And probably some of you would ask, why am I using the mesh in this pose instead of the standard T pose? Well, I'm deliberately using this pose of the hand because you will certainly run into a situation where a client provides you with a mesh that needs to be rigged. It will most often not be in the nice and clean T-pose where you can have straight joint chains. So this is a real life situation. You have a mesh which is not really uh, designed in terms of pose for rigging, but that's what you got and you have to work with it. Okay? So this will be working on the hand and the fingers. Actually collapse these two guys, and maybe I will need this arm. The first thing is, how will we approach building this hand? And I'm telling you this because it's really painful to animate, especially fingers with standard FK or IK setup. And for that reason, I would rather go with sliders. So to create some sort of control where I could control multiple rotations of the joints, we will create with a single slider. And to do that, we will most certainly have to place joints inside. So let's do just that. Let's once again not place them manually. Let's select the loops. For example, this one, this also. So just select the loops where it feels logical they should be. So I'll create for the tip something like this. If I go to my character menu, the conversion, and if I hold down Shift key and choose this selection to joints, create the joints into place of those loops exactly in the middle. I will go to my object tool and select the joints, and I want to name them appropriately. And since I will be copying these joints to multiple fingers, I would select a naming convention that is really logical. So for example, this would be finger 1. And if I just press the down arrow key on my keyboard, I will select the next one here. But be careful, sometimes this conversion can trick you a little bit. You can actually see that this would be a joint number 3, so name it accordingly. So 3, the next guy is actually 2, and this, the last guy, is 4. The naming of your object, the naming convention you will use, it is completely up to you, but it is really good idea to be consistent. So if you use one naming convention for a finger, be sure to use the same method on the other fingers. That way you will really simplify managing those hierarchies and especially simplify the usage in Espresso. Okay, so let me create a simple relationship. So now see I named them 1, 2, 3, 4, so I can actually easily say how the hierarchy will be set. If I would name them like root joint and this joint or some other naming convention, that is really somewhat illogical to me, and it really makes things a little bit complicated, and you always want to avoid that in rigging. Keep it simple and versatile. First thing that I will do also, which is also personal preference, you see these bones and the size of joints, I want them to be a little bit bigger. So I select the first one and middle click my mouse. I will select them all down the chain, and here under bone menu, this small menu, I can select how those bones will be displayed. And I prefer this line mode, and for the size of the bone I will enter the custom and put something like, I think 3 would be good enough, suits me. So find what suits you and makes you most comfortable to work with. Okay, so now the parts you shouldn't forget, and that is you should align all those joints. You see how those axis guys are a little bit off, so just choose a joint align tool in the default mode and hit align. It will pretty much work for you until the moment you will really understand what would you possibly have to change to achieve something different. So I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible because I really have somewhat a different idea how to read these fingers, but that would probably make things really complicated and difficult to follow. So we'll use some sort of this standard setup, which is pretty much sufficient for almost any situation involving fingers. So now the joints are, let's say, properly aligned, and I want to press Alt-G just to create a group, to put all the joints under a group and name that finger accordingly. So this would be an index finger. I'll select them all and freeze all transformation on them. So I'll be able to use this reset guys on them, and of course reset options that I will create in the sliders. So I want to have nice clean 0 values, and you will see how useful is that in Espresso instead of having some arbitrary wild values. So now if you select one of these joints, and you see you can actually control it, but what if you want to control this other guy? You see, I already have problems selecting, and then I would have to hide my axis and simply select this other guy, and this is very painful, and it's not quick, and it's not versatile, and it's really problematic, and we will want to avoid it and have as much automated setups as you can in Cinema 4D. The one thing that also bothers me is the size of this axis. So I will press Alt V. This is the same as this edit configure all, but I really prefer shortcuts. And here under view, I will scale the axis down. Actually, you can see that real time in the viewport, so something around 50% is good for me. So it's much easier to work with. Let's go even lower. Let's go 25. This is too little. Okay, 35. Just looking for the right value that suits me. So now, before actually creating some sort of a user data in sliders, we have to decide what kind of functionality we need from the rig. So never do anything without the plan and idea what it should look like and how it should function. I think this is too little. Let's leave it to 50%, and that will be all right. So instead of poking settings and trying what works for you, doodle it, sketch it on the paper, have exactly the plan what you want from your setup, and that would be a lot easier to do, and it will help you avoid frustrating situations. In this case, I want, let's say, three different functionalities from these fingers. So let me doodle it for you. For example, I want the finger to have the ability to go from just like a real finger from side to side. I also want the ability to naturally bend it in this direction, so it has a freedom of movement. And I also want the ability to curl the finger like this. So almost all natural movements that you can see on your own finger, I want them here. So there is 3 different setups. Let me delete this doodle guy. You can create the user data for that, and that would be side to side, bend, and the curl. So let's select our index finger and go add user data. So what kind of data we are looking for? Well, first let's create a side to side slider. So if you remember correctly, it will just change this interface to float slider. And You can see the default value is 0 and it goes from 0 to 100. You can see the example of your slider here, so it will look like this. Really what I want to achieve is to have the default value here at 0 and the ability to go to minus 100. So it would go both ways. So for example, you could bend this finger in this direction or move it side to side in this direction. So it should go in both positive and negative values. I will rather type here minus 100 and this is the result I will get. So I have 100 units in both directions, which I will control later. And this is the exactly same thing we need for both bend and curl. So let's control drag this guy, copy it, and just name it bend. And once again, control drag it, just like in the object manager. So cinema is pretty much consistent everywhere, and we will call this curl. Okay, and click OK. And you will see here under user data, we have now new guys side to side, bend, curl. One thing we will most surely want and need is the ability to reset those sliders. Currently you can reset them by right-clicking and simply stating reset to default. But many times you will create a setup with different sliders, and imagine doing all that for every single guy, or even selecting all this and really stating reset to default. I would rather have a simple checkbox. So let's manage our user data and predict that ability. So we'll add another type of data. Let's say I want a checkbox to be on the top, and I will say here reset sliders. Okay, the interface of that guy, remember from previous lessons, should be Boolean. So Boolean, that is a simple example, so it's a little checkbox. Okay, the default value simply means what will be the default value of that checkbox. Okay, can now press OK. You see we have this guy here, and just to show you another little tiny thing in Cinema4D, I will add a separator here. So manage user data, I will add data, and in this case this data type here will be separator. So it's just a line to separate those guys. You see this, it will create a separation between those two guys. And you can of course name that, and instead of data you can put here fingers. So if you click OK, you will see that you have some sort of a common denominator for all these controls. So it's logically divided in some way, so you can see the difference, not cluttered in a single entity. And now I believe we have everything we need to build our espresso system for these sliders. And we will do just that. I will just take a short break and I will be right back. So let's build that espresso for our sliders. And first we will add naturally an espresso tag. And just to make things a little bit easier, I will dock it, since this is my preference, how I like to do with espresso. You can find that something completely different works for you. Since we will copy this expression and the user data we created on this index finger to these next fingers, simply to avoid doing it all over again for every single finger, it is a really good idea to, instead of dragging this index guy here, it's a really good idea to create an object node. So right click, create an object node, and you can see it created the object node, but its name is the index. We'll just derail for a moment. So I want to explain you this absolute and relative reference. If I will pull this guy here directly, I will create an absolute reference to that exact object. Delete this. And if I create here an object node, just like I did, I will create a relative reference. So relative means to which this expresso tag belongs to. So the absolute mode will always refer to an object you have put it in here, regardless of where that expresso tag sits. And the relative mode means that the object mode you put here will be the object on which this expresso tag sits. I hope this is understandable enough. So let's try to clarify once more. So absolute is always the one you have put it inside without even have to worry where that expresso is. It can be on some completely other object. But in the relative reference mode, will always be the one on which that expresso tag sits. There is also a use start position, which I will not explain because it could really confuse you additionally, and it's really meant to control hierarchies below, but we will skip that for now and deal with what we initially had in mind. So back to the track, let's extract all that user data we created, those sliders. So let's go with reset sliders, and it is really important to put this, let's go with the side to side, and then we will go with the, let's say, bend, and then we will go with curl. What I was trying to say, it's really important to remember the order of these guys. So you will have to use exactly the same order on the next user data you will create for another finger, just to keep consistent. Otherwise, you will have some errors in Espresso, and that is what we don't want. So if you use reset sliders and side-to-side bend curl in this index finger, then extract it the exactly same way on the, let's say, middle finger. So let's start with side-to-side. We will leave these reset sliders at the end. So after we build all these three, we will deal with these reset sliders. So firstly, this side-to-side control should really control this rotation of this finger, side to side. And you can see here in the coordinates manager which axis is that. So it's the heading axis. Let's undo that. So we have a 0 value here, and we'll simply select the same joint and drag it in our Espresso, and here under coordinates we will extract rotation H. That's pretty simple. So if we connect them now, watch what happens. Now that user data, that side to side, will control the rotation, and it really does a decent job. But the problem is, you see, now I have to enter 0 here, or right click here and say reset to default, and that can be really time consuming and tedious. That's why we build these reset sliders. And although this direct connection creates somewhat of a decent result, you don't have enough control. What if you want to limit the rotation? So 100% would be somewhere around here. So let's see. Well, the maximum amount should be around, let's say, 75. That would be pretty much the maximum amount of that finger, how it can move in a realistic way on that axis. So let's undo that. So you cannot limit directly. You have to use, again, this precious range mapper node inside Cinema4D. So let's right click, and here under calculate, select this range mapper. And this is where things most of the time become confusing for users. So I will take time to explain you this really slowly, so you will understand and do things with the plan. So firstly, my controller here is in percentage. You can see it goes from -100 to 100. So let's put it to 0. So I will say that my input range, and input range in this case is the slider itself, is in percent. So it works in percent. And here you can see it gave you some values 0 to 100. And my lower end of my slider is actually -100. And the upper value of my slider, as you can see here, is 100. So now we have a correct input range. Our slider is from minus 100 to 100 and it's in percentage. And now we will deal with the output. So as you probably assume, we are going to output the rotation. And in this case, the rotation h. And rotation in Sina 4D is simply a degree. So how many degrees can this rotate in each direction? And we will set the output range to degree. And we have a 0 to 360 here. That means full circle, and we don't want that. We want to limit it to 75 degrees. Because as we tested here, that's pretty much the maximum amount of side-to-side movement for this finger. And since it will go both ways, see, it will go into negative value here and into positive value here, you'll have to state as a 75 degrees. So in this case it would be minus 75 in one direction here and 75 in positive direction here. So that means minus 100 will be minus 75 degrees and 100% will be 75 degrees. So let's just test that, always test. And actually nothing will happen until we connect those two guys, and let's give it a go. And you can see it works. The only thing that bugs me a little bit is if I go to the right with my slider, the finger goes actually to, let's say, left, and the opposite, it goes to right. I want to change that. We'll reset this, so right click, reset to default, and to change that I have to swap these values. Yes, I will say 75 here and minus 75 here. So I just change the direction. So now if I go left here, it will do the same in the viewport, and on the other hand, it will go in the other direction. Once again, I will zero that out. You can see how tedious this can be. That's exactly why we need this reset sliders guy. And that's it for our side-to-side control. Let's build the bend guy next. The bend guy is also simple. It's just a matter of outputting this slider to another rotation. In this case, it's not H rotation, it's actually the P rotation. So let's undo that. And we can copy both of these guys by selecting them both with the Shift key, and we will hold the Control key down and simply drag it to a new position and then release. We will have additional 2 nodes. Here what I want to change is only the rotation P instead of H. Connect both of them and simply connect the bend here. So let's test that guy and see what we got. So it bends decent, but I think we have to have a little bit more freedom in that moment. So this should go a little bit more. So instead of 75 degrees, let's try 100 on both. So 100 and minus 100. And you will see it instantly updates. So you can actually control how much will that freedom be right here in the Express. So maybe even a bit more. So let's try 110, and if we will select our control and go all the way in the opposite way, let's see, it's pretty decent. We can leave it to 100 degrees. So with a simple copying and reusing what we already have, we created additional control. Okay, so we will put this to 0, and let's build our curl control. This will involve some additional steps. For the sake of the clarity, I will just hide this mesh. So it's kind of in the way. Now we have a little bit more cleaner situation, so we can see how that curling will occur. So to create that kind of effect, I have to really control 2 joints. Potentially that would be this one and this second guy. So they have to move both at the same time. So they have to rotate both at the same time. Really somewhat of a smaller amount. So let's say something maybe like 45%, somewhere along that lines. You can always change the values, but really try to read them out from the actual feedback you have in the viewport. So you can see just above my cursor there is the amount of degrees that joint rotated. You can do that and control this range mapper, create a copy, and since we will change nothing else except this output of degrees, so instead of 100 degrees in both ways, we will use somewhere around 45 and minus 45. So that will be our starting point. Probably it will work good enough. We can also copy this rotation P guy, but beware, it will copy the joint 1 in this case, and you have to replace that because it's in absolute reference. So you can select this arrow here and simply point to which guy you want to use, and watch here. As soon as I click, it will change the reference to joint 2. So the actual joint we want to control with this scroll guy. I'll just scale this window just a bit so you have the ability to see it more clearly, because I don't want to work with really small express. I don't know how that will be seen in the video itself. So I want to have pretty much large nodes for you to understand what's going on. So as we said, we want to control this guy number 3 also. So let's simply, you can actually also drag here and say coordinates rotation P. So it's a matter of what you prefer, what works for you. You can copy, you can do anything you want. I'm just showing you different methods and you will probably find one that suits you the best. So we'll control both of these guys with this range mapper. So we are saying we want one slider to control it from minus 100 to 100 and to output 45 degrees in both minus and plus directions. That is why espresso is called espresso. It's simply a way to express something. So let's connect that curl slider and let's give it a go and see what we have. So this curl guy should curl the finger, and it does a pretty good job, but we have a small issue here. You see, this first joint should also be involved, so we have to control it also with this curl guy. And the problem we have is if we will drag this output guy into the first joint, so we want to control the P rotation also with this range mapper. If we connect it, it will disconnect the bend, so bend will not work anymore. So that's a problem. And if you want to control two values with two range mappers, you will have to use additional node for it. So you have to find a way to tell both range mappers to go into one node and to calculate the actual value of that rotation that it will output. I hope this is not complicated to follow. So that's why it is connected when I connected this. So it can follow only one value of that. So you cannot output, let's say, 1 and 2 at the same time. It has to be one single value. So we have to add those values and we will use a math node. So new node, espresso, calculate math. And we'll put it somewhere like here. Now we will feed both of these range mapper guys into the input. So let's be consistent and put this one at the bottom and this one, let's put it in the top one. So now it will calculate both of those values. So you will have a single output. So let's feed the rotation P with it and let's give it a go. Let's try the curl now. You can see it works much better. And the good thing is you won't have sliders clashing with each other. This bend guy will know exactly what this curl guy is doing and the opposite. So you won't have sudden jumps in the animation and so on and so forth. So this is really awesome. This is the math node, and math node has really quite a few functions here, so feel free to explore. So let's set those guys to 0, and the only thing we have left now to enable the mesh, we want to have a reset slider for all those guys. One thing that you should not forget is if you add a parent object for joints or any other object, just select all and do a freeze all just in case you don't have any wild values here in the joints. So all these calculations will be correct. So let's build that reset switch, but just before that we will optimize this a little bit. So we want to have nice and clean layout in Espresso, and if I start adding a bunch of more nodes, then we will get a cluttered workspace, and this is what we want to avoid. And simply draw a selection around all of these guys, and if you right click on them and you can say convert to X group, you can simply put them in one of these X group boxes. Nice thing about it is if you double click anywhere on this white area, you can collapse group to this little tiny box. Also, it's a good practice to right click and rename it to something that is really logical. Let's try something like sliders. Hit OK, and now we have much more space to build another Espresso setup, so it's not cluttered anymore. And if you remember from previous lessons, if we check this guy on and move the sliders, and if we want this to act as a reset button, once we check it, we will not be able to move from the 0 value. So we once again have to create a switch that will turn on briefly and turn off instantly. Okay? We already built that setup, so we know how to do that. So let's drop that condition node here. So condition. I hope you remember you have to change this to a bool type of parameter. Here it is. And simply connect those two guys. Now once again, as in previous lesson, we cannot output this to this same guy. And since we want all this Espresso to stay relative to the object that has this tag, we once again drop an object node. So Espresso general, and here is the object. And it will naturally assume the name to which this Espresso belongs. We will extract the user data here. So extract these reset sliders, and we can connect this output to these reset sliders. Okay, and let's try it out. So if I click on it, it should automatically send that information and turn itself off. And it really does that. You see, I click and it automatically turns off. This was pretty much the simple part. Now comes a little bit more difficult part. So how do we tell these guys here to go to 0 once we check this? So naturally we will have to output from this reset sliders guy. So this guy should output that information. It should tell those sliders to go to 0. Okay, so let's extract them here in order. So side to side. We'll just expand this guy a bit. Bend, and finally the curve. So let's try to be smart and simply connect this reset to a side to side first, and we will test it and let's see what happens. So let's play a bit with the value, and it suddenly jumps to 0. Why is that? Since this reset box is actually a Boolean value, so it can have two states. It can be off or on. So it can be 0 or 1. So in this case it is 0, so our slider always goes back to 0. Okay? So this is very bad. We have to create another setup. For this, we have to find a way to turn the zero value with the switch and automatically turn it off. In Espresso, there is a nice node, which is here under General, and it's called constant node. So you can feed in some sort of a constant value in your desired inputs. So let's be smart and set here a value of 0, which is already is by default. Simply connect all these guys. And this will mean stay at 0 constantly, no matter what. So even if I try to move this, see, it will come back again. You see, we have a redraw problem. I will show you that. You see how I pull the slider and it snaps back to 0 because this constant node tells it be at 0 all time, but the finger actually doesn't come back in the position. And I'll just turn off this mesh. It's kind of in the way, and you see that triggered the redraw. Let's try once again, side to side, and you can see even if I rotate the viewport, nothing will happen. But if you, for example, hit the play button in the timeline, it will refresh. That is why you have an option here under character commands auto redraw. We talked about it. So if you enable it, you will force the redraw of all values in Sina for this. So now if I pull it to the side, it will do as it should. So it will snap to 0 and it will refresh the view. Okay, this is very useful. There is also let me show you in Command Manager, there is a redraw command. You can assign a shortcut key, which I have already assigned. It is the A key, and you can manually refresh it. So if you go side to side and simply hit A, it will refresh the viewport. This refresh problem happens from time to time, and it's really easily solved. Okay, so let's go back to the flag. So currently this constant node tells those three guys to always stay at 0. And for example, if you enter a different value here, something like 1, watch what happens. Since 1 is actually, yes, full 100%. So we have to find a way for this constant node to be enabled when we actually check our reset sliders checkbox. And there is a small issue with this setup, since there are no input ports on this constant node. You cannot feed the information to that node itself. But there is a workaround, and that is exactly why I'm using the constant node, just to show you that there is a workaround for this kind of situations. And the workaround is to group the node itself. So once you right click and say convert to X group, you will actually get a possibility to have input nodes of various kinds, as you can see, and this is really simple. So try to think in a logical way. This reset slider should be checked and it should enable this node. And since that reset slider turns off immediately after it's checked on, that means that this node will do the same. So let's find the enable port here and simply connect this reset guy here. So let's try it out. So it should work as we expected. So you could move your sliders any way you want, and once you hit the reset button, they should all go to 0 and the reset slider should be blank. Once again, you can see we have that redraw problem. So if I enable this auto redraw, it will work as expected. I find this automatic redraw to be really useful, so I'll simply dock it here. Let's say somewhere out here. So it's always in my workspace, but it really doesn't bother me. It is really useful when you will be dealing with some sort of dynamics and stuff like that, as I already showed. So once again, we are playing with our values here, and once we hit the reset slider, they go all back to 0 and the slider reset button stays blank. So there you go, you have your sliders, your fingers with sliders and the reset slider itself. So let's be really consistent, we will group this also once again in another group. So convert to X group and let's collapse it and let's give it some really reasonable name, something like, let's say, reset sliders. Hit OK, and there you go. You have non-cluttered setup. You can maybe possibly right click and do an optimize command, just in case, and there you go. And always try to test, try to break your setup, find the flaws in the setup, and if you can find it and you need such functionality, try to fix it and create a new one that is stable. So let's copy our setup to another finger. We can collapse this espresso window and keep it in layout with middle clicking this little dotted cube here, so it will fold into layout, but it will be accessible once again you click it here. So let's open some space and unhide the mesh naturally and go into edge mode, and I will just to be sure, I will do a Control Shift and A command. That means deselect all, just to make sure I don't accidentally select something else and create a joint where I don't want to. Also, be sure to click somewhere here in the empty space. This will deselect any tags that you have selected, just to be sure, and select only the mesh. This can really get rid of some serious problems later. Okay, so let's select those loops, this middle guy here, and this guy here, and that would be 1, 2, 3, 4 guys. So let's go here under character. Once again, the same thing. We will convert the selection to joints. Don't forget to hold the shift key down, and it will create 4 joints. So rename them accordingly. Be sure to be in the object mode, so you can actually see when you select another one which one you selected, just to be sure. And this is the joint 1, so use the same naming convention you saw 1. Let's go a step down with down arrow, and you can actually see this is the joint number 3. I don't know why Cinema sometimes do this, but it simply does this. And beware of that. So let's go a step down. This is actually the 2 and this is 4. So you can see now it's really easy for me to arrange that hierarchy, because if I have used some other naming convention, it would be a little bit more difficult to know which one is the parent and then the subsequent child. With numbers you simply cannot go wrong. So 1, 2, 3 and 4. Let's add a parent now, so Alt G, and call that middle. Now, since I want to keep things consistent, I want to first select all these joints, middle click, and I'll set the display. Let me just first delete everything in the script log, just to show you something. You can always search the way to speed up your workflow. So I'll set the display of the bone to a line. I'll set the length custom, and I'll set it to, let's say, 3. So you see here in the script log, you can simply create a new script that will do all that in a single go. So it's just a way to speed up the workflow. The next thing I want to do is, and you should not forget this, is to align the joints. So character, joint align tool, and simply click align with the default settings. Okay, and we only have one more thing to do. So select the whole hierarchy starting from this root guy. So simply middle click on it, and you see now currently my active tool is the move tool, and I want to see the attributes of those objects I selected. So you can easily do that by selecting the mode here and selecting the object. And what I want to do, as you already guessed, under coordinates, I want to freeze all to nice 0 values. Okay, and now I want to create the same sliders from my fingers just as here. And instead of doing this manually, I will simply, you can select these guys, and by control clicking you can select them in succession. So select them all and go right click, copy user data interface, and go to your desired object, in this case the middle finger, and simply say under user data, paste user data interface. And this window will pop up. You can simply say OK. I want to just tell you something that is really important. Click OK. Here under index finger, if you remember, we have a separator. Let me just show you that. So manage user data. Don't add separators when you paste user data interface. Add it once you create the espresso and finish everything. Then you add separators, or you possibly get into trouble, because the espresso tag you will copy will maybe have, or quite possibly have, problems understanding which of this slider is which one. Okay, so this is really important. Okay, now we have the interface, but we actually don't have the espresso for this guy. So let's control drag this one and copy it, and we'll actually solve another problem, and I will show you a usage of something inside espresso which is quite often neglected. So let's try it out. Let's try, does it reset? And you could see we have a problem. We move those guys, they do reset, but they actually don't do anything with these joints in the viewport. So this is really bad. There is an obvious problem with this. So let's open the espresso, and see, this is the same group. You can obviously see that this reset guy is working, and that is because I deliberately skipped something that I will show you right now. And it has all to do with references. So as you can see, this guy is currently in the absolute reference mode. So it means it will reference this guy that was dragged inside here, which was the original joint that was extracted. So this is no good. If we change to relative, we will have no success, also since this espresso tag is actually on a null object, not on this join guy. Actually, you can do it in the relative reference also, but I want to show you a little bit better way, in my personal opinion, is to do it with this use start position. Okay? So we change this start position to this object. You will see it will assume the object on which that espresso tag is attached. And if you say down the hierarchy by start distance of 1, it will select the one below it, the child, the first child as it encounters. Okay, this is really good. This is actually what we want. So we can do the same thing here. So use start position, down hierarchy, and start distance of 1. This is good. How about this guy? It is in absolute reference. So let's change it. Let's go to use start position, down in hierarchy, and see under the header practice, and watch how this joint number changes. So now it will actually control joint number 1. And it counts the distance. This start distance is the distance from the guy that espresso is attached. I hope this is not too difficult to follow. So in this case, it would be the distance of 2. So this joint 2 would be actually here joint 2. And of course, this third guy would have to be the distance of 3 from this middle guy. So this is the nice way to have everything in your, you can see it really works and resets properly. This is a nice way to reference everything in Espresso relative to an object, so it can be reusable. So just to show you that is really reusable. Let me just delete that extra window. It's kind of in the way. So let's just, for example, delete on our first finger. Let's delete the espresso tag completely. So our sliders do absolutely nothing. Okay, let me undo all those. Right, and we will simply control drag this guy. Now, when it's all relative and set up the way as it should, and you can see it works. Okay? So this is really neat. You can actually save this as a tag preset, name it, let's say, for joint espresso setup with reset or something like that with a really logical name. Or you can even create a null object. Let us do just that. So let's create a null object. And let's even save the user data interface because you have to have an object to be able to save it. So we just paste the user data interface on this null guy. Hit OK. We'll copy the tag itself and we can now select the object, this null object. Let's, for example, call it for joint finger. And you can save this object preset and call it for joint fingers. And instead of creating this null, root null, and creating this espresso all over again, delete this. You can simply load it, load object preset from this user preset. Here you see I already had some fun with this. So you can see that now we'll have user data sliders, it will have reset button, and of course all the espresso for it. And of course you can now see that these guys are really yellow because they are saying I'm missing an object. But for example, if you would copy all this joint hierarchy outside and drop it right under this null, it will all be good. Simply remember what it has to do. So I hope this is not too difficult to understand. So you will basically be a little bit more versatile than in this reference mode. Okay, let me close this espresso and this also. And I don't see the point if you're looking how I will build those rest of the three fingers with exactly the same method. I believe this would really eat up the tutorial time, and I really want you to get maximum amount of information and tips and tricks for your money. So I can create a simple script that will help me create new joint chains. I will create the same espresso for these two fingers, so for this ring finger and for this pinky finger, and the only thing I will change is I will create a free joint setup for this thumb finger. So nothing fancy, and I will reuse this espresso also on this finger, but I will just make small adjustments, and adjustments will be in terms of selecting the correct joint here. Okay, so let me do all that and I'll be right back. So here we are, all the fingers are ready, and don't worry, I used completely the same techniques. I can even get rid of this guy and pull this down so we have a little bit more space here. These guys that I made are completely the same. So for example, this ring finger, this also has a curl, bend side to side, completely the same. And also it's the same on this thumb guy. But in this case, the bend actually goes this way. Okay, so it's pretty simple to get. Nothing fancy. The espresso is even a bit more simpler for this guy, as you can see. That's it. That's all the fingers we need, and we can proceed now, because I want to build a completely independent finger and hand setup, so we can find a way to connect this existing arm setup that we already have, so they can work together seamlessly. One thing that I will certainly need is, if I want to deform the mesh with joints, I will have to have a joint here. So this joint should be responsible for this area of the mesh. So it will take control of that, and we will create a new joint for that, and we will call it a palm joint. Let me get rid of this little guy. So the easiest way to do this is simply we have this joint here. We can actually copy this guy, call it palm. I believe this is called the palm of the hand, and simply pull it downwards only on the z-axis, so it keeps the same orientation. You don't have to align anything, so it will really work without a problem. And also if we scale this just a little bit down, something like let's try 20. Yeah, this would be good. So this joint will be responsible for this palm geometry. And of course, what is also obvious, we want to pull all these fingers as a child of that palm. So simply that palm will be its parent. It will move the complete hand. It will move all the fingers. Of course, now it's best to put all that now in a one more group. So Alt G and call this hand. Okay, so this hand guy is actually the null in the same place as the joint, and maybe we should do something different. Maybe we should undo that. I can actually snap this to this axis, but I will show you a different way. So undo that, and once again select this wrist joint, because I want the origin, the parent of the complete hand, to be on exactly the same place as this joint. So I will simply convert it to a null, so character conversion, convert to null, and pull it outside, rename it hand, and simply put all this palm and the fingers as a child of it. So now it is really good idea, do not forget this, select all. You can really unfold all with this command under view, folding, unfold all. So now if you middle click on this guy, you will actually see that it selects all, just if you want to have visual confirmation of that. But you can also have visual confirmation of that in viewport. So see, it selected all of the joints, everything down below. And now it's time to freeze those guys, to freeze everything to 0. So this reset position, this reset rotation guy will also work. Okay, so now if you take a look, we have actually a completely independent setup. So it's a hand for itself, and this is completely other setup, is arm setups. Reset position. Okay, you see how useful was that? If I haven't done the freeze transformation, we wouldn't be able to reset the position. Now we are actually ready to bind all that once again to this arm polygon mesh. So how will we select all those joints inside? Will we expand all this and select them by hand? I don't think so. That is really tedious. And let me show you some workflow tips. For example, here there is like a closed eye icon, and here you can select objects, tags, and even layers by type. And you can see we have joints listed here. And just to be sure, click somewhere in the viewport, and that will deselect anything you have selected, or simply press Ctrl Shift and A on your keyboard. So instead of selecting them manually, I will rather right click here in this filter manager and simply select all joint. Yes, this will select all the joints. All the joints will be selected. You can see their names here. Okay, and you could now select the arm mesh and simply bind, but let me show you one little neat thing in Cinnabar. You can create a selection object. So go here under selection filter, and hit this create selection object command, and I have this new guy in the object manager. So let's just click off somewhere. So we deselected all those joints. So this selection guy really stores everything we had selected once we press that command. So it will store here under object everything we have selected. Okay. So now if you hit restore selection, you can simply restore all that joint selection you made. You can do this on everything inside Synapse4D. So it's really, really useful. And of course, you can rename it here. I will say joints. Simple as that. So I don't have to dig through hierarchy or do some tricks here with filter or something like this. I can simply hit the selection object, do a restore selection, and now select my mesh and go character, commands, byte. I really hope I haven't lost anyone for now, and let's continue. Now, you see, just like in previous lessons, we got the weight tag and a skin deformer. So if we will play a bit with our goal object, you'll see something happening. It is not the way we want it. Okay? That hand, that completely custom setup we made, this other setup has to be connected with this arm in some way, and we will do just that. So what if we put this complete hand hierarchy as a child of our crystal, of our controller? So it will obey the position and rotation of our controller. So let's give it a shot. So let's try. So far so good, it looks fine. The hand follows. Let's try something else. Let's, for example, try some fingers. Let's open up the hierarchy and let's go here. You see, if I expand this, everything will be unfolded. So if I want to fold it, again, I will go here and review folding, fold selected. Okay, so now it's all neat again. So let's select, for example, this the index finger and try, let's say, a curl. And you can see we have some issues with weighting. Okay, so Synapse4D did pretty good job with auto weighting, but we will fix that. And let me try something else. This is most oftenly a problem, and you can see the problem now. I can move this guy, but what about rotation? I cannot rotate this guy, and this is because this align goal is enabled. So happily I will uncheck it and try to do something with rotations, and let's see what happens. And you can see we have a problem with weight painting, and it's not good. So let me do just a brief pause. I showed you how you will paint weights. I will just block them out on this and fix this area a bit so we can follow this a bit more precise. So I'll be back in a second. So here we are, and just did a small changes to weighting. It was really basic. I really smoothed out the loops between these two joints with the weight tool. Okay, so let's continue. Now we have better deformations here. Okay, so it's really not that good, but it's decent enough. Okay, so let's reset the rotation and reset the position. And you actually saw the preview of the problem we had. So let's say I want to move this guy, and you can see my hand stays in the same position, so it doesn't rotate with the arm. So will I animate this by hand always? You see the problem. If I enable this align goal, it will snap and align itself properly, but now it looks good. But there is another problem. What if I want to rotate that hand now? I simply can't. That IK align goal overrides everything I do with rotations. It's simply not good. And what if I want to position this hand, let's say in this position, keep it fixed and just move this guy? See, I can't. That is really a problem. That is because how this IK solves, and I don't have what I want. I have to find a way to solve this issue. I hope you understand what I mean, because this is not really usable. If I, for example, animate this, enable this, I will have a sudden pop. This is not good. I cannot animate or work with this. This is really a limitation. The behavior I want to achieve is I want to be able to rotate freely just as I want, but I want that hand to stay fixed just as I rotate it in relation to R. Yeah, I hope you get that. So it simply doesn't do what it should. Okay, so let me build that setup, and hopefully you will understand what I mean. I'm sorry, but my English is not that good. I simply cannot explain that better without an example. So let's do an example of it. Let's build that double constraint. So to simplify, what I want to achieve is I want this hand to, you can see it's currently the child of this controller object. I want this hand to rotate when I rotate this wrist goal, but I also want it, let me just move it a bit and I will show you. I want this hand, this axis, you can see this guy, I will doodle it for you. You see this guy, the orientation of this guy, and this one. I want this one to orient itself also in that direction. Okay? Well, that makes it a little bit more clear. So I wanted to follow rotation from another guy, and that's a job for a constraint. So currently, as it is a child object of my wrist goal, it will follow the position and the rotation. So I had to take it out from the hierarchy and create a constraint for that. So let's create a constraint, and in this case this is PCR constraint, and I will add my first target, and my first target will be, as I said, the wrist goal, and all we want from the wrist goal is the rotation. Okay, I will collapse this layer browser and even turn off this redraw just to get some responsiveness in the viewport. And if I want to follow this axis, the orientation of this axis, I will create another target, and in this case I want it to be this wrist guy. So because this is the joint that rotates and reorients itself when the IK is solved. So when you move this wrist goal, that joint is rotating. Okay? I hope you understand that, and let's drop that wrist here and enable, in this case, position. I hope this won't confuse you. So our hand will follow the wrist goal, just the position, and will rotate according to the rotation of our wrist goal. So it's really simple. Let's try it out. So we select the wrist goal, and this is really nice what just now happened. This will give me an excuse to explain you something about priorities. You see how it wobbles here? Check this out. And it wobbles because of the priorities, and that is how objects are calculated inside Cine4D. And to solve this, you should really put your constrained object below the object you constrained to. In this case, we constrained also to this wrist guy. So if you put this in hierarchy below here, watch what happens now. If you select your wrist goal, it won't wobble anymore. So objects in Cine4D are calculated from top to bottom. Okay? So in this case, it got a little bit confused. It calculated constraint itself before the wrist joint. I hope this is not also difficult to understand. So let's continue with the tutorial, and now we have exactly what we need. We can rotate any way we want it, and it will stay in that position, and we can simply move it wherever we want. So the orientation will be just as I want it. Hope you can see the difference. And if you want to, let's say, just orient the arm to default position, so it's straight like some sort of a rigid robot look, you can always go to this IK tag and simply say align goal, and it will snap to this position. Okay, I really hope you like this lesson and you've gained some insight into rigging. So let's once again briefly talk about everything we did. So we've done a separate arm eye keychain, we created a separate hand system, and we connected those two together with constraints and some simple parenting. And I hope this is enough. And we will talk now about something a bit different that is really, really also interesting.